A Terrible Vengeance by Miss J. H. Riddell. Chapter 1. Very Strange. Round Docket Point and over Drumsey Deep, the water lilies were blooming as luxuriantly as though the silver Thames had been the blue Moomal Lake. It was the time for them. The hawthorn had long ceased to scent the air, the wild roses had shed their delicate leaves, the buttercups and cardamoms and dog-daisies that had dotted the meadows were garnered into hay. The world in early August needed a fresh and special beauty, and here it was, floating in its matchless green bark on the bosom of the waters. If those fair flowers, like their German sisters, ever at nightfall assumed mortal form, who was there to tell of such vagaries? Even when the moon is at her full, there are few who care to cross Chesney Mead, or face the lonely Stibbery. Hard would it be, indeed, so near life, railways, civilizations, and London, to find a more lonely stretch of country, when twilight visits the landscape and darkness comes brooding down over the Surrey and Middlesex shores, when the path which winds along the river from Shipton Lock to Chertsey Bridge. At high noon, for months together, it is desolate beyond description, silent save for the rippling and sobbing of the currents, the wash of the stream, the swaying of the oysers, and the trembling of an aspen, the rustle of the withies, or the noises made by a bird, a rat, or stoat, startled by the sound of unwonted footsteps. In the warm summer night also, when tired holiday-makers are sleeping soundly, when men stretched on the green sward outside their white tents are smoking, and talking, and planning excursions for the morrow, when in county houses young people are playing and singing, dancing, or walking up and down terraces overlooking well-kept lawns, where the evening air is laden with delicious perfumes. There falls on that almost uninhabited mile or two of riverside a stillness which may be felt, which the belated traveller is loath to disturb, even by the dip of his oar as he drifts down with the current, past objects that seem to him unreal as a fragment of a dream. It had been a wet summer, a bad summer for the hotels. There had been some fine days, but not many together. The weather could not be depended upon. It was not a season in which young ladies were to be met about the reaches of the upper Thames, disporting themselves in marvellous dresses and more marvellous headgear, unfurling brilliant parasols, canoeing in appropriate attire, giving life and colour to the streets of the old-world villages, and causing many of their inhabitants to consider what a very strange sort of town it must be in which such extraordinary robed persons habitually reside. Nothing of the sort was to be seen that summer. Even as high as Hampton, excursions were limited to one day. There were few tents, a few people camping out, not many staying at the hotels, yet it was perhaps for that reason an enjoyable summer to those who were not afraid of a little, or rather a great deal, of rain, who liked a village inn all the better for not being crowded, and who were not heartbroken because their womenfolk for once found it impossible to accompany them. Unless a man boldly decides to outrage the proprieties and decencies of life, and go off by himself to take his pleasure selfishly alone, there is in fine summer no door of escape open to him. There was a time, a happy time, when a husband was not expected to sign away his holidays in the marriage articles, but when Boots talked to of the remote past now. Everything is against the father of a family at present. Unless the weather help him, what friend has he? And the weather does not often these latter days prove a friend. In that summer, however, with which this story deals, the stars in their courses fought for many an oppressed paterfamilias. Any curious inquirer might even have walked ankle-deep in mud from Pentonhook to East Moseley, and not met a man, harnessed like a beast of burden, towing all his belongings upstream, or beheld him rowing against wind and tide, as though he were a galley-slave chained to the oar, striving all the while to look as though enjoying the fun. Materfamilias found it too wet to patronize the Thames. Her dear little children also were conspicuous by their absence. Charming young ladies were rarely to be seen. Indeed, the skies were so treacherous that it would have been a mere tempting of Providence to risk a pretty dress on the water, for which sufficient reasons furnished houses remained unlet, and lodgings were left quite empty. Taverns and hotels welcomed visitors instead of treating them scurvily, and the river, with its green banks and leafy airs, its white swans and water lilies, its purple loosestrife, its reed rushes and weeping willows, its quiet backwaters, was quite delightful. One evening 2 men stood just outside the door of the ship, Low Hillford, looking idly at the water, as it flowed by more rapidly than is usually the case in August. Both were dressed in suits of serviceable dark grey tweed. Both wore round hats, and both evidently belonged to that class which resembles the flowers of the field, but in the one respect that it toils not, neither does it spin. Both look intensely bored, and both were of rather a good appearance. The elder, who was about 30, had dark hair, sleepy brown eyes, and a straight, capable nose. A quite heavy moustache almost concealed his mouth, but his chin was firm and quite well cut. About him there was an indescribable something calculated to excite attention, but nothing in his expression to attract or repel. No one looked at him, and would have said offhand, "I think that is a pleasant fellow," or "I'm sure that man could make himself confoundedly disagreeable." His face revealed as little as the covers of a book. It might contain interesting matter, or there might be nothing underneath save the merest commonplace. So far as it conveyed an idea at all, it was that of indolence. Every movement of his body suggested laziness. But it would have been extremely hard to say how far that laziness actually went. Mental energy and physical inactivity walk oftener hand in hand than the world suspects, and mental energy can on occasion make an indolent man quite active, while mere brute strength can never confer intellect on one who lacks brains. In every respect the younger stranger was the opposite of his companion. Fair, blue-eyed, light-haired, with a soft moustache and a tenderly cared-for whiskers. He looked exactly what he was, a shallow, kindly, good fellow, who did not trouble himself with searching into the depths of things, who took the world quite as it was, and who did not go out to meet trouble, who loved his species, women included, in a quite honest way, who liked amusement, athletic sports of all sorts, dancing, riding, rowing, shouting, who had not one regret, save that hours in a government office were so confoundedly long. Eating the best part of a day, by Jove! No cause for discontent, save that he had very little money, and into whose mind it had on the afternoon in question been forcibly borne that his friend was a trifle heavy. Carries too many guns, he considered, and not exactly the man to enjoy a modest dinner at Lower Halliford. For which cause, perhaps, he felt rather relieved when his friend refused to partake of a meal. "I wish you could have stayed," said the younger, with the earnest and not quite insincere hospitality people always assume when they feel a departing guest is not to be over-persuaded to stay. "So do I," replied the other. "I should have liked to stop with you, and I should have liked to stay here. There is a sleepy dullness about the place which exactly suits my present mood. But I must get back to town. I promised Travers to look into his chamber this evening, and tomorrow, as I told you, I am quite due in Norfolk." "What will you do, then, till train time? There is nothing up here till nearly 7. Come on the river for an hour with me." "Oh, thank you, no. I think I will walk over to Staines." "Staines? Why Staines, in heaven's name?" "Because I am in a humour for a walk, a long, lonely walk. Because a demon has taken possession of me I wish to exercise. Because there are plenty of trains from Staines, and because I am weary of the Thames Valley line. And any other reason you like, I can give you none better than I have done." "At least let me row you part of the way." "Oh, again thank you, but no. The eccentricities of the Thames were not new to me. With the best intentions you would land me at Lelham, and I should be on my railway to London. My dear Dick, step into that boat your soul has been hankering after for the half-hour, and leave me to return to town according to my own fancy." "I don't half like this," said genial Dick. "Ah, here comes a pretty girl, look." Thus entreated, the elder man turned his head and saw a young girl, accompanied by a young man, coming along the road which leads from Walton Lane to Shepperton. She was, in fact, very pretty, of the sparkling order of beauty, with dark eyes and rather heavy eyebrows, dark thick hair, a ravishing fringe, and a delicious hat, a coquettish dress, and shoes which by pretty gestures she seemed to be explaining to her companions were many, very many sizes too large for her. Spite of her beauty, in spite of her dress, spite of her shoes so much too large for her, it needed but a glance from one conversation with subtle social distances to tell that she was not quite her young man's equal. For in the prevalence of Besley Jane, as her young man, she evidently regarded him, and as her young man had regarded himself. There could be no doubt that the matter, he was over her head and ears in love with her. He was ready to quarrel, indeed, had quarrelled with father, mother, sister, brother, all on her account. He loved her unreasonably, and he loved her quite miserably, distractedly, except at odd intervals. He was not in the least happy with her. She flouted, she tormented, she maddened him. But then, after nearly driven him to the verge of distraction, she would repent sweetly and make up for all previous shortcomings by a few brief minutes of tender affection. If quarrelling be really the renewal of love, theirs had been renewed once a day at all events, and frequently much oftener. Oh yes, she was a pretty girl, a bewitching girl, an errant flirt, a scarcely well-behaved coquette, for as she passed the two friends she threw a glance at them, one arch, piquant, inviting glance, of which many would instantly have availed themselves, venturing the consequences certain to be dealt out by her companion, who, catching the look, drew closer to her side, not too well pleased, apparently. Spite of little opposition, he drew her band through his arm, and walked on with an air of possessive infinitely amusing to onlookers, and plainly distasteful to his lady-love. "A clear case of spoons," remarked the younger of the two visitors after the pair. "Poor devil," said the other compassionately. His friend laughed, and observed mockingly, paraphrasing a very different speech, "Ah, but for the grace of God, there goes Paul Murray." "You may strike out the but," replied the person so addressed, "for that is the very road Paul Murray is going, and soon." "Oh, you're not serious?" said the other doubtfully. "Am I not? I am, though not with such a vixen as I dare swear that little baggage is. I told you I was due tomorrow in Norfolk. But see, they are turning back. Let's go inside." "All right," agreed the other, following his companion to the hall. "There's a great surprise to me, Mary. I never imagined you were engaged." "Oh, I'm not engaged yet, though no doubt I shall soon be," answered the reluctant lover. "My grandmother and the lady's father have arranged the match. The lady does not object, I believe, and who am I, Seville, that I should refuse good looks, good fortune, and good temper?" "You do not speak as though you liked the proposed bride, nevertheless," said Mr. Seville dubiously. "Well, I do not dislike her. I only hate having to marry her. Can't you understand that a man wants to pick a wife for himself, that the one girl he fancies seems worth 10,000s of a girl anybody else fancies? But I am so situated. Hang it, Dick, what are you staring at that dark-eyed witch for?" "Because it's so funny. She's making him take a boat at the steps, and he does not want to do it. Kindly observe his face." "Oh, what is his face to me?" retorted Mr. Murray savagely. "Oh, not much, I dare say, but it is a good deal to him. It's black as thunder, and hers is not much lighter. What a neat ankle, and how you like to show it, my dear. Well, there's no harm in a pretty ankle or a pretty foot either, and you have quite a both. One would not wish one's wife to have a hoof like an elephant. What sort of feet is your destined maiden, Paul?" "I've never noticed." "Well, that looks deucedly bad," said the younger man, shaking his head. "I know, however, she has pure sweet face," observed Miss Murray gloomily. "No one could truthfully make the same statement about our young friends, little lady," remarked Mr. Seville, still gazing at the girl, who was seating herself in the stem. "A termagant, I'll be bound, if there ever was one. Wishes to go upstream, no doubt, because he wishes to go down. Any caprice about the Norfolk fair?" "Not much, I think. She is good, Dick. Too good for me," replied the other, sauntering out again. "That is what we always say about the things we do not know. And so your grandmother has made up the match?" "Oh, yes. There is money, and the old lady loves money. She says she wants to see me settled, talks of buying me some estate. She'll have to do something, because I'm sure the stern parent on the other side would not allow his daughter to marry on expectations. The one drop of comfort in the arrangement is that my aged relative will have to come down, and pretty smartly, too. I would wed Hecate to end this state of bondage, which I have no courage to flee from myself. Dick, oh, how I envy you, who have no dead person's shoes to wait for. Oh, you need not envy me, returned Dick with conviction. A poor unlucky devil chained to a desk. There is scarce a day of my life I fail to curb the service, the office, and fate. Curse no more, then, said the other. Rather go down on your knees and thank heaven you have, without any merit of your own, a provision for life. I wish fate or anybody had coached me into the civil service, apprenticed me to a trade, or sent me to sea, made me enlist, instead of leaving me to mercy of an old lady who knows neither justice nor reason, who won't let me do anything for myself, and won't do anything for me, who ought to have been dead so long ago, but who never means to die, and who often gives you, in one check, as much as the whole of my annual salary, added the other quietly. But you know you will have your yearly salary as long as you live. I never know whether I shall have another check. Oh, it won't do, my friend, answered Dixville. You feel quite certain you can get money when you want it. I feel certain of no such thing, was the reply. If I once offend her— He stopped and then went on. Perhaps when I have spent 20 years in trying to humor such caprices as surely woman never had before, I shall wake one morning to find she has left every penny to the asylum for idiots. Well, why do you not pluck up courage and strike out at some line for yourself? Too late, Dick. Much too late. 10 years ago I might have tried to make a fortune for myself. I can't do that now. I've waited too long. I must wait a little longer. At 30 a man can't take pick in hand and try the clear road to fortune. Well, then you'd better marry that Norfolk young lady. I am steadily determined to do so. I'm going down with the firm intention of asking her. And you think she'll have you? I think so. I feel quite sure she will. She's a nice girl, the sort I would like for a wife, if she had not been thrust upon me. Mr. Saville stood silent for a moment, with his hands plunged deep in his pockets. Then when I see you next, he said tentatively, I shall be engaged, most likely. Possibly even married, finished the other, with as much hurry as his manner was capable of. And now jump into your boat, and I will be on my way. To Staines. I wish you would change your mind and have some dinner. I can't. It is quite impossible. You see, I have so many things to do and to think of. Goodbye, Dick. Don't upset yourself. Go downstream. And don't go into mischief for those dark eyes you admire so much just now. Make your mind easy about that, returned the other, colouring, however little as he spoke. Goodbye, Mary. I wish you well through the campaign. And so, after quite a hearty handshake, they parted, one to walk away from Halford, and past Shepston Church and across Shepston Range, and the other, of course, to row upstream, through Shepton Lock, and up past Docket Point. In the grey of the summer's dawn, Mr. Murray awoke next morning from a terrible dream. He had kept his appointment with Mr. Trevis and a select party, played heavily, drank deeply, and reached home between 1 and 2, not much the better for his trip at Lower Halford, his walk, and his carouse. Champagne, followed by a neat brandy, is not perhaps the best thing to ensure a quiet night's rest, but Mr. Murray had often enjoyed sound repose after similar limitations, and it was, therefore, all the more unpleasant that in the grey dawn he should wake suddenly from a dream in which he thought someone was trying to crush his head with a heavy weight. Even when he had struggled from sleep, it seemed to him that a wet dead hand lay across his eyes, and pressed them so hard he could not move the lids. Under the weight he lay powerless, while a damp ice-cold hand felt burning into his brain, if such a contradictory expression may be permitted. The perspiration was pouring from him. He felt the drops flow into his throat and tickle down his neck. He might have been lying in a bath instead of on his own bed, and it was with a cry of horror he last flung the hand aside, and sitting up, looked around the room, in which the twilight of morning was most mysteriously stealing. Then, trembling in every limb, he lay down again, and fell into another sleep, from which he did not wake till roused by broad daylight and his valet. You told me to call you in good time, sir, said the man. Yes, so I did, yawned Mr. Murray. What a bore. I'll get up directly. You can go, Davis. I'll ring if I want you. Davis was standing, as the master spoke, looking down at the floor. Yes, sir, he answered, after the fashion of a man who has something on his mind, and went. He had not, however, got to the bottom of the first flight, when peal after peal summoned him back. Mr. Murray was out of bed in the middle of the room, the ghastly pallor of his face brought into full prominence by the crimson dressing-gown he had thrown around him on rising. What is that? What in the world is that, Davis? And he pointed to the carpet, which was covered. Miss Murray bringing an old-fashioned lady with strips of white duget. I'm sure I do not know, sir, answered Davis. I noticed it the moment I came into the room. Looks as if someone with wet feet had been walking round and round the bed. It certainly did. Round and round, to and fro, backwards and forwards. The feet seemed to have gone and come, leaving a distinct mark wherever they pressed. The print is that of a rare Smallfoot, too, observed Davis, who really seemed half stupefied with astonishment. But who would have dared? Well, not in this house, declared Dave stoutly. It's not the mark of a boy or woman inside these doors. And then the master and the man looked at each other for an instant with quite grave suspicion. But for the second they kept their eyes thus occupied. Then, by its common consent, they dropped their glances to the floor. My God! exclaimed Davis. Where have the footprints gone? He might well ask. The duget, by a moment before wet and stained by the passage and repassage of those small wetless feet, was now smooth and white, as when first sent forth from the bleach-green. On its polished surface there could not be discerned a single speck or a mark.